Lift every voice and sing till let the heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun with our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
The person who wrote that song, his name is James Weldon Johnson. He was a civil rights activist, a writer, a composer, a politician, an educator, and a lawyer. He graduated from Atlanta University and was admitted to practice law in Florida, the first Black person after Reconstruction to do so in Florida. Wrote that song. Having a law degree and a law license is having a key in your pocket. Some of you don't even know the doors it's going to open for you later. Come on, somebody. Okay. What's interesting is he didn't even practice law. Right? So why did he become a lawyer in Florida if he didn't want to practice law? I think he wanted to prove a point. In 1898, after a grueling 2-hour exam, Johnson was given a pass and admitted to the bar. One examiner expressed his anguish by bolting from the room and stating, "Well, I can't forget he's an N-word, and I'll be damned if I stay here to watch him be admitted." First Black person admitted in Florida after Reconstruction, and that's what the examiner said. A lot of you didn't know that, did you? So what we're here to talk about today is context. There's all this drama with Lift Every Voice and Sing at the Super Bowl. Well, there's only one national anthem. There is. But there's a reason why Black people have a national anthem. We're not trying to be divisive. We were being left out. And so we said we're going to do our own thing. And we've been doing our own thing pretty good so far, so we're going to keep doing our own thing. Is that all right with y'all? Yeah. And what's important is that we tell our own stories in our own words. Everybody's entitled to tell the stories they want to tell. History is being written right now. It's being rewritten as we speak. There's this great quote by Howard Thurman. So don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive. And do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. This is what makes me come alive, by the way. I love history. I love interviewing people. I've done over 100 podcasts with During the Esquire podcast. I had such a great time interviewing these individuals. We're going to hear from Delano Stewart, first Black lawyer in Hillsborough County Public Defender's Office, started George Edgecombe Bar Association, the Tampa Organization of Black Affairs, and was the person who had the first integrated law firm in the state of Florida. You're going to hear from Arthenia Joyner. She was a former state senator. First Black woman lawyer in Hillsborough County, first Black lawyer, period, in Polk County. Still practicing law today. Justice Peggy Quince, first Black woman Supreme Court Justice for the state of Florida, and Mr. Donald Odom, who's here. First Black attorney at the City Attorney's Office in St. Pete. He was in the County Attorney's Office. There's a lot of pioneering attorneys here in Tampa Bay. And why did I decide to do their interviews? Well, I kept going to all these great events, all these diversity events, and I was hearing all this great stuff. And I'm like, man, did anybody record that? People are sharing all these stories. I'm like, did anyone record it? They're like, well, no, we didn't think about that. We just figured we'd gather everyone, and right? But I'm like, the young people today don't know what was happening just 50 years ago. I saw something on social media said Black history was yesterday. Think about it. And it had a picture of Samuel L. Jackson at Dr. King's funeral. Black history was yesterday. Both Peggy Quince and Arthenia Joyner still have active bar licenses today. Mr. Odom just recently retired. And they're the first. When I was practicing, you all have heard this story before. I was at a law firm. I went to all over Florida. Polk County, Pasco County, Pinellas County, Hernando County. I went to all the courthouses. I was in court every week. One day I was in Polk County. in Bartow Courthouse, and I'm walking, and this older, elderly Black woman came to me and said, "Ma'am, are you a lawyer?" And I was thinking, oh, here we go. I'm gonna have to politely turn down the opportunity to give this lady free legal advice, right? Because I thought that's what was gonna happen. Because all the time, like, can you help me with this? You know, and you can't give advice in the hallway. That's not how this works, right? And I said, yes, ma'am, I'm a lawyer. She said, God bless you. I'm so proud of you. I'm so happy I got to live to see this. And it was 2010. So I'm like, what is going on in Polk County? Because I'm from New York. I'm like, you've never seen a Black woman lawyer? Wow. And then I find out Arthenia Joyner was the first Black lawyer, period. And I'm like, oh, now I get it, right? Context, that's all. It's been 6 years I've been working on this. And then I put a period, and I was like, I put a comma, then I put a period. I said, no, I'm done, Ricky. I done asked everybody you can think of to premiere these videos, to share it, to create a platform for it, to help fund it. And all I heard was silence until my Balsa baby said yes. So thank you to my Balsa babies. I'm so excited. So you heard who these 4 wonderful attorneys are. Let's see what they had to say about their early childhood experiences.
I can remember one of the first cases I had after I finished law school, and I was still living in DC at that time. I put on my best clothes. I thought I looked like a lawyer. And my client's case was called. I walked up, started walking to the bench. Before I even got to the bench, the judge says to me, "Who are you, the defendant?" So I had to take a deep breath. And I said, "Your Honor, my name is Peggy Quince. I am a member of the bar. I am representing whatever my client's name was." And I handed him my bar card. But why make the assumption that I'm the defendant? First of all, the defendant was a man. And those kinds of things really make you feel like you want to scream.
So the city attorney's office was the first agency where I worked, where we had multiple lawyers, and of course I was the only Black lawyer there. It was a positive experience. I did not experience any overt racism there. There were a couple of things that happened that were a little subtle, and I can describe a couple of them. I remember one day I had to go speak to one of the, actually I think he was the office manager about something. And I went to his door, and his door was closed. And I heard him, we had a full-time investigator, and I heard him at a muffled tone through the door before I knocked on the door, something to the effect, "Have you seen buckwheat today?" Being the only African-American on staff, who were they talking about? And so I went back to my office, and I thought about it, and I said, what is the appropriate response to this? Do I go to the boss, or do I confront them myself? And I just thought about it. Said, they didn't say it to me. They didn't know that I heard it. So I just opted to just let it go.
Went to Washington and worked actually about 2, maybe 3 weeks in the executive office of the White House. But I didn't like the way the man talked to me, and I quit. And I liked Washington, and I thought about staying there, but my encounter in this executive office of the White House was one that was not something that I treasured, and I just walked out one day and said, nobody talks to me like that. And then I got a call from my former professor, Gwen Cherry. Gwen Cherry was the first Black woman in the Florida legislature. Gwen Cherry was from Miami, and she lived next door to a gentleman, and he was looking for an aide. His name was Joe Lane Kershaw. Joe Lane Kershaw was the first Black elected to the Florida legislature since Reconstruction. And Gwen recommended me for the job. So I became the first Black aide in the Florida legislature. because I worked for Joe Lang, who was the first since Reconstruction, rather. And Joe and I were the only two blacks in the Capitol who were not janitors or maids. And from there, I decided after working maybe about a year with him, then I'm ready to practice law, and I came home to practice law. I couldn't get a job. Nobody wanted to hire me. I was the first black woman lawyer in Hillsborough County.
All right, so that's some of their early childhood experiences. Now we're going to take a glimpse at what it was like for them in law schools, for the law students in the audience. I hear from y'all all the time, law school's so hard. They want us to do all of this, and I gotta work, and it is hard. It's a privilege. Y'all heard that, right? Everybody don't get in. You know, most students who apply to law school don't get into any law schools. So just getting in, you already beat some of the odds. But although it's hard for you now, it used to be harder then. And there are people who went through those experiences for you so that all you had to complain about was the amount of reading that you had to do. Okay? I love Mr. Stewart. Let me tell you about the first time I met Mr. Stewart. I didn't know he was the Delano Stewart. He was just opposing counsel in a mediation. And I walk in and he said, young lady. I said, oh, here we go. I'm going to let my new associate handle it. You look young. So we go into the mediation. I do my presentation. He said, hold on. I think I'm going to take over. And then years later, when I'm interviewing him, you were there, Ricky. He said, I was so impressed with you that day. I was so proud, even though you were whooping my behind, right? And so he really is just a legend here in Tampa Bay and all over the country, by the way. But he's going to share with you a story about what happened when he was during his law school experience.
So, notwithstanding all of the disproportionate unfairness, I was always aware that if I messed up, they would take my bar license so fast. See, I told my dad or something. I didn't pass the bar the first time. I was going to make excuses. I couldn't get a barring course. I had not been to a Florida law school. Mr. Duff was a friend of Oliver Maxwell, who was the chief judge, and my daddy knew him from Urban League. We went to see him, and I went with Judge Maxwell. Mr. Duff said, Dillon, this law review put course is 95% of my income, and I don't know what would happen to me economically if I integrate and people are enrolling. And I said to somebody, if you cross a picket line, you're going to fight and you might die. And so well, I can't tell this man to give up his income for me. I would like for him to have done it, but that's not realistic. This man had built this thing 20-some years of age, so he had a right to protect his interests. So this is the agreement. I sat on the step of that ornate, beautiful Tampa Theater building with my foot on the steps, and he'd leave his door open and hear my lecture. I didn't pass the first time, but I did the second time. And you have to do what you have to do.
So I finished college and came home and taught school that one year and went on to law school in 1965. And in 1966, the Florida legislature, well, they created another law school in Tallahassee at Florida State that opened in 1966. But the legislature also did not appropriate any funds for the Florida A&M University College of Law beyond 1968. So we knew that we would be the last class. And there were 6 of us, 2 women and 4 men. And the other woman was C-Beth. She and her husband, Dr. Wimbish, had been threatened. They had lived in Tampa, and they had been threatened with violence for being active in the movement. And so they moved to St. Petersburg, and she applied for Stetson Law School, and they denied her admission. She had the credentials, the scores on the tests, so she applied to FAMU, and we ended up there in 1965. And Beth had a son, Carrie, who was 6 years old, and she brought him with her. We studied together, and only after she finished helping him with his homework every night. She was an outstanding mother and a great person, and and I learned so much from her because I was 20, whatever, 3 or 4. Bet was 40. And so I learned a lot from her.
I started law school, I think it was in 74. Again, I didn't know what to expect. I also applied to UF, and they did accept me with a fairly good financial package. But my wife, still had to work, to kind of support us through law school. So obviously, I didn't know what to expect. We arrived on campus for classes, and I think at the time there were very few black students, probably no more than 30 in the law school. And I think there were maybe 8 in my class, maybe. As black students, we all kind of thought maybe that there was something not straight about the grading. But of course, you could never prove anything like that, And so, what do? You just go in and you do your best, Certain professors had, reputation, for being better to black students. And of course, everybody wanted to take their classes, and others, not so much. Took the bar in 77. I graduated in December of 76. Took the bar in 77 and passed it and went to work.
So I met my husband in law school, and we were, two maybe anywhere from 10 to 15 black students in a class of 125 students. So we really pretty much bonded together. To this day, I am still in touch with many of the black students who graduated with me. We did not lose any students in that class. But a part of why we bonded so well and stayed together is because, there was still a certain amount of tension about whether or not we were entitled to be in law, we meaning black students, whether or not we were entitled and good enough to be in law school. I remember clearly one day the professor came into the class and was rambling on, and at one point says, looking at the black students, looking me straight in the eye, that he felt that it was his obligation to weed out the incompetent students. He was looking at me. He looked at the other black students in the class. Tell you, from that day forward, I was determined, whether I enjoyed law school or not, whether I got the grades I thought I deserved in law school or not, I was not going to quit. I was not an incompetent. And I would show him and everyone else that I was entitled to be in law school, that I deserved to be in law school, and I was going to complete law school. Because, often there are thoughts of, is this the right path for me? Am I really doing what I am called to do? But I tell you, that was one of the greatest incentives that I encountered, by him looking at me and saying he felt it was his obligation to weed out the incompetence. And so we studied together, the black students, not all of us, but a lot of us. We did projects together. We were determined to finish law school. And the group also included my future husband, Fred Buckine, and we were just determined. We knew that even in 1972, 73, 74, that there were people who felt that we were not entitled. Just look at the Bakke case. That was a case that was decided when I was still in law school. And so, but we were determined that we were if this is what I want to do, I am determined that I am going to do it. And so that's what we did. And we were determined when it came time to take the bar. I took the Virginia bar exam first because I'm from Virginia. I passed the Virginia bar exam. And so while we were still living in DC, I studied for the Florida bar exam because I was determined I don't have the money or the time to retake the bar exam. So I studied and of course, took the Florida bar examination and passed it. My husband and I moved to Florida. We had one child at that time who had been born while we were working in DC.
Don't let any professor tell you what you're going to do in your life because you don't know, and they don't know. If you're struggling in law school, if you're struggling to take the bar exam, Delano Stewart failed it the first time. Don't matter how many times you fail it, just got to pass it one time. Got to pass it once, okay? Because I know we just had the Florida bar exam, so that's on some of y'all minds, right? Okay, so now let's hear about, this is the last set of clips, their early work experiences. They've all graduated. They've all got the bar card. I just did a talk yesterday called Ain't I a Lawyer? Because what they're talking about is happening now. Black students, you heard what they said? They looked around, there was 10 in their class. Y'all don't even got 10 in y'all class. From 1976. You heard what Professor DuBose said? Right? That's what we're seeing now. Barriers are placed up, and it might not be about race or gender or immigration status or age, but it's going to impact those groups the most. Yep. And so in my talk yesterday, I talked about all these early work experiences and how I had the bar card in my pocket. And it's supposed to come with benefits and privileges. But every time I showed up to court, all these benefits and privileges are not bestowed upon me, or I'm not given the benefit of the doubt, et cetera. And so interviewing these individuals about their early work experiences in the 70s was very sobering, but it's inspiring as well, right? Because they're able to overcome these barriers. The point isn't just to talk about bad things that's happened, it's to give you context and to show you strategies that you can apply today when you see barriers are being put up for other people. So this is the last clip. It's about 5 minutes, and then we'll wrap up. I'll show you the QR code so that you can watch the full presentation on YouTube. And then I'll be around to answer any questions, okay? Because I know we started a little late, so I appreciate your indulgence.
I can remember one of the first cases I had after I finished law school, and I was still living in DC. I can remember one of the first cases I had after I finished law school, and I was still living in DC at that time. I put on my best clothes. I thought I looked like a lawyer. And my client's case was called. I walked up, started walking to the bench. Before I even got to the bench, the judge says to me, "Who are you, the defendant?" So I had to take a deep breath. And I said, "Your Honor, my name is Peggy Quince. I am a member of the bar. I am representing whatever my client's name was." And I handed him my bar card. But why make the assumption that I'm the defendant? First of all, the defendant was a man. And those kinds of things really make you feel like you want to scream.
So the city attorney's office was the first agency where I worked where we had multiple lawyers. And of course, I was the only black lawyer there. It was a positive experience. I did not experience any overt racism there. There were a couple of things that happened that were a little subtle, and I can describe a couple of them. I remember one day I had to go speak to one of the, actually I think he was the office manager about something. And I went to his door, and his door was closed. And I heard him, we had a full-time investigator, and I heard him at a muffled tone through the door before I knocked on the door, something to the effect, "Have you seen buckwheat today?" Being the only African-American on staff, who were they talking about? And I went back to my office, and I thought about it, and I said, what is the appropriate response to this? Do I go to the boss, or do I confront them myself? And I just thought about it, said, they didn't say it to me, they didn't know that I heard it, so I just opted to just let it go.
Went to Washington and worked actually about 2, maybe 3 weeks in the executive office of the White House. But I didn't like the way the man talked to me, and I quit. And I liked Washington, and thought about staying there, but my encounter in this executive office of the White House was one that was not something that I treasured. And I just walked out one day and said, nobody talks to me like that. And then I got a call from my former professor, Gwen Cherry. Gwen Cherry was the first Black woman in the Florida legislature. Gwen Cherry was from Miami, and she lived next door to a gentleman, and he was looking for an aide. His name was Joe Lane Kershaw. Joe Lane Kershaw was the first Black elected to the Florida legislature since Reconstruction. And Gwen recommended me for the job. So I became the first Black aide in the Florida legislature because I worked for Joe Lane, who was the first since Reconstruction, rather. And Joe and I were the only two Blacks in the Capitol who were not janitors or maids. And from there, I decided after working maybe about a year with him, then I'm ready to practice law, and I came home to practice law. I couldn't get a job. Nobody wanted to hire me. I was the first Black woman lawyer in Hillsborough County.
So those are just some of the clips. They haven't been shown before. Thank you.